Piet van der Merwe joined the station in March 1991, so it's for 30 years. Training, obviously, the station commander in those days was Ken Brady. Got my crew badge about 6 or 7 months later, and then from there progressed to a class 3 coxswain. One of the first crew members to do the helmsman course was Bruce. That lasted a couple of years. I then became the deputy station commander for a short while with Peter Adamo, and after that with Brad Geezer. And I retired recently from sea rescue when I moved to Eisenfontein up the coast. Got about 2,000 operational hours, and had many good moments, a couple of sad ones, but 30 years of good memories.
My name is Bruce Morgan. I'm a resident of Yacht Bay. I joined approximately the same time as Piet in the early part of 1991 as a trainee. We worked through the courses, navigation, seamanship, first aid, radio license. We really learned a lot during those days. I think, as Piet mentioned, when we were young and slim and our hair was dark, we could do a lot of things together on the boat as crew. We learned a lot about comradeship, about instruction, about supporting each other in daytime or at nighttime. It doesn't matter what the sea conditions, we obey the coxswain and we support each other.
Okay, there were 2 calls that sort of stand out. You get many calls, and sometimes they're easy and quick, and sometimes they stand out for various reasons. And 2 of those calls that myself and Bruce were involved with, one was called the Dustoras, which was a 70-ton fishing trawler full of fish, and it had a serious motor problem, and it was at night, and we had to tow them in from other side Cape Point. Now that was the old Rescue 8, which had very old Caterpillar diesel engines, if I remember correctly, and it took a while to get going. Top speed was about 11 knots.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Now I remember that I was the navigator on the craft at the time, and as Piet said, we had to find this vessel way down south, and we hooked up a tow line expertly, put a crewman across, and I remember setting the chart, taking a beam bearing on Comic Light at 2200, and I made a note of the time, and the coxswain said we were doing 3 knots over the ground, because this thing was heavy and the Samson posts were creaking. And I settled down and I shut my eyes. And about 20 minutes later I took another beam bearing, and Comic Light was still exactly at 90 degrees to starboard. We hadn't moved at all, but we were doing 3 knots because there was a current setting against us and a bit of a wind. So I think we took all night to get that vessel.
I remember that day very specifically. It was my daughter's birthday, and we had made arrangements to go to the Spur in Yacht Bay. Those days Yacht Bay had a Spur. It was the 9th of August. And my comment when I left home was, "We'll see you guys shortly, don't worry, I'll meet you at the Spur." I think we got home at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Correct.
But another thing that I remember on that call, it was the speed we were traveling. It was like all emotion in the world to get sick. Now I do get seasick, but my friend here, Bruce Morgan, with the navigator, he also got sick, and somewhere along the line I put my hand into what he left on the deck. And I said to him, "What did you have for lunch?" And he said, "No, I had a pizza," which it made a lot of sense.
Yes.
But that call stood out, and the crew on that last call was me,
Martin Pritchard.
Martin Pritchard was on that one.
Charter Muris.
I've got a feeling either Ian Klopper or Andrew the cock was on it. You were the coxswain, and I know it took a long time. And when I got home, my daughter wasn't happy with me. But another one that also stands out is the Yacht Pan, which happened in May. And in May we get those big northwesters, the start of the winter season, big storms, big winds. And for 3-4 days everybody's been talking about this big front coming. And we went to friends of ours on the Saturday night. I think it was a birthday dinner or something. And in those days we still had pages. And and we were joking that we don't want to call tonight, and believe me or not, as we were about to leave at 10 o'clock that night, there goes the pager of the Pambreen, a yacht in the stress of Slankop Lighthouse. Now, when you leave on certain calls that you know that this is going to be trouble, this is an ugly one, because the wind, the northwester, was a proper gale, storm. We're talking 7, 8, 9 meter swells and visibility almost zero. And off we went.
It was a crew.
On the crew was myself, Bruce Botman,
That was
Coxon, we were on that boat.
Yes.
And there was a girl called Bridget Morgan, which was a trainee, but she got sick very early on. She just fell apart. And I remember leaving the bay, even before we went past the Sentinel, you look back and you just saw water. So these were 8 and 9 meter swells, and I know this is in for a long night. We eventually, after a couple of hours, found Pambreen, but now you've got to get tow line to them. He had an experienced skipper on board, but two novices never sailed in their life, and the poor man was really in trouble, and this yacht was blown out to the deep sea at a hell of a speed.
We had to put a crew member across to help.
Yeah, that also didn't work. To sort of go through the motions of the night, we're now heading into the early mornings, and we got Rescue 3 from Table Bay around, but they had to get a complete new set of crew when they got there because everybody got seasick.
Just to get here.
Yeah. And Station 2 was here, and they had similar problems. We came back because at that stage I thought I was dying. And we were still looking for this yacht that we found once or twice, but once or twice the tow were broken, it sort of got blown away.
Yeah, it was a very big craft.
It was a
The
big
wind was
craft.
strong.
And the problem was the visibility was nothing, it was the storm conditions. As morning was sort of arriving, 6:30, 7 o'clock, they found him some distance off Slankop Lighthouse and towed him in. The call took 17 hours, one of the longest calls we've ever done. It involved 3 rescue boats, mobile and whatever relay messages.
Multiple
And
crews.
in total, I remember in the back of my head, 30 crew members went to sea.
Yeah.
And I think 27 out of the 30 got seasick. It was one of the worst conditions ever.
Yeah.
But we brought them back alive,
Yeah.
safe, and but a very difficult one.
You know, you can remember these rescues, as Peter's mentioned, they stick in your mind. You remember that fishing boat that missed the entrance to the harbour in the middle of the night, thick fog, and ran aground up the beach here at 10 knots. And then we came down, there's nothing to do, everybody was safe and waving from the ship, and they were hard aground. We had to wait for high tide, and then they got a commercial.
And the skipper was Portuguese, he couldn't understand anything, and we had a Portuguese controller.
We were lucky, yes. So they were fine. So that was a case of hurry up and wait for the tide to change. But I think also our training was something that also stuck in your mind. If you remember the times we went around to the wreck of the Boss 400, which is off limits now, but at that time you had the Antipolis and the Amelia had run aground in the late 1980s, 90s or so, and we would do exercises jumping off that Amelia, which was around the corner there. And that was teamwork, that taught us teamwork.
I think the call that gave me the biggest fright was not too many years ago where a pleasure boat called the Moroshka, I think it was about 42 passengers on board, didn't run aground, but capsized off Seal Island. It was a Saturday afternoon, good weather, and I picked up sirens and I picked up the neighborhood watch radio calling for NSR assistance. Cut a long story short, I was at the base almost first to open up, and more crew members arrived. We got the boat in the water, and then the first casualties got brought in by ski boats and other craft that was out in the area. And all of a sudden you're on your own in the base and you're dealing with 10 people who's been in the water for some time, who are totally hysterical, lost all their possessions, a number of foreigners looking for husbands, wives, family members. wasn't an easy one. It became a massive call with the assistance of Metro and other stations. And as I say, we had to deal with 42 people. End result was 3 were trapped underneath the hull. I got them out, and I think at the end of the day, 2 casualties, a crew member and 1 tourist passed away. But all in all, a good story, because we could have lost 42 lives. Yeah, 30 years, many stories. Flew helicopter, started in the days of the old Hunter's Gold or John Rolfe.
Yes.
Moved on there into the ASR.
Jumped
out of it into the sea. Many good memories.
Been hoisted out of the sea with 2 of us clutched together on a string and hauled up 1,000 feet into the air.
And then dropped again.
Yeah. All in the name of teamwork, but that stuff you never forget.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we can't do that anymore these days because health and safety doesn't require it. Now, well, here we are standing around the pub at our social corner in the base. We're just surrounded by memorabilia, caps from past members, photographs of us when we were very young and thin, many years
black hair.
and we had dark hair and we were thin. But just one little piece of memorabilia that stands out apart from the ship's bell is this heavy piece of tow rope that we've got up on the wall, which is a piece of history that we had on one of our long rescues. And I think Piet would also like to say something about that.
We got a call one night of a yacht in distress, and there was a seriously gale force southeaster blowing. It was a serious one. And this was an overseas couple in their 60s sailing from Texas doing a round the world cruise. And the yacht turned out to be a 35 cement trimaran called Beach House.
Huge.
So this was like a hotel. It was a massive thing. In any case, we located it, put a tow line, and now we are towing it back to Yacht Pan. Unfortunately, with a southeaster in excess of 100 km an hour, the wind was on our stern and was really pushing the beach house onto us, and we couldn't outrun that yacht. So we got the assistance of Rescue 3 from Table Bay to come and help and act as to put their tow line on and act as a brake. So you've got Rescue 3 at the back with a tow line and we in front. And guess what? The southeaster is now more than about 130, 140 km an hour because one of the Metro guys took a wind speed reading, and that beach house is chasing us.
And that was at night time too, so it makes everything different at night.
And you can't talk because the wind noise is just unbelievable.
Yeah.
And as we were entering the bay, we realized there's trouble coming because beach house is now almost upon us. Our tow line went underneath and has got stuck into the prop of Rescue 3. Now here's a picture. Rescue 8 is in front, towing a 35-ton trimaran, and attached to that lot at the back is Rescue 3 with our tow line and their prop. No control.
And it's night time.
And it's night time and the wind is picking up and blowing. So I knew there was trouble when we had 2 Samsung posts when the one snapped. And,
yes.
And this was serious trouble. I grabbed the axe, I hit the tow line to cut the tow line. I missed, hit a massive divot into the stern, and then hit the tow line again like a gunshot. We took off, and the trimaran, beach house, and Rescue 3 got blown into the harbour, onto a jetty where there was no fishing vessel, nothing.
Miraculously through the harbour gates, no steerage way or anything. But I must just remind my friend Piet, the Axeman of Yacht Bay, in the middle of the night, cold hands, freezing seawater everywhere, he had to swing that axe. And I remember watching from the cabin, his first blow, hands were cold, it was wet, and the axe flew out of his hand and spiraled out into the air as if in slow motion. All of us were gathering around it. That axe had gone overboard. That was the only axe we had, but he grabbed it in mid-air and swung it again like Thor from the Marvel comics and snapped that tow rope. You see how thick it is. And it released us. And as you mentioned, by a miracle, those 2 craft who were tangled together flew into the harbour under the wind and finished up at a jetty where there was
Next to the
no,
ice tower.
just across
And
the
no other vessels there. The lady fell in the whole event and broke her collarbone. But it could have been a very tragic affair with both rescue boats going down.
Yeah.
That wind was just uncontrollable. And as I said, Dr. Cleve Robinson, who's today the CEO of NSRI, took a wind speed reading, and he was still in those days the man in charge of Metro, and said he has never seen a rescue like this. So that tow rope will stay there forever. When I die one day, they can put a piece of that in my coffin. On the boat was myself, Bruce Morgan, and Bruce Botner was a coxswain. Who else was on that boat?
Martin Pritchard. No, it was like beyond, it was out of our class to actually tow a thing like that. At night and in those wind conditions, it would have been challenging on a day like we have today, where it is.
We could have been killed. I know of crew members that got off that boat and said they're not going to go back on a rescue boat, and they haven't been back on a rescue boat. Behind me is one of the Sea Rescue's latest, or their latest deep sea rescue craft, the Ork. It's a 14-meter rescue vessel. High-tech computer stuff inside, and it's just the crew to man it and do it needs to be highly trained, highly skilled, because this boat is mega expensive as a locally built boat, but a huge commitment to look after that asset. Just for young guys considering joining a volunteer organization like National Sea Rescue, it's a huge commitment. As I said earlier, there's lots of fun but also hard work, and but the big thing is commitment, because there's no salary, sacrifice hours, sometimes family time, but a special person, but the self-reward is huge.
Yes, that's right. I think the commitment you give is what you get back. The training you get here is first class. You've got access to all kinds of seamanship and related skills that you wouldn't get anywhere else other than here. And Sea Rescue provides that for you. So if you give 110%, Sea Rescue will give that to you back.